I didn't say a word when the HOA president leaned across the folding table and waved that violation notice in my face. He had that smug little smirk they all practiced, the one that says, "We've got you cornered." But instead of arguing, I just slid the federal contract across the table, the one with my name on it, the one proving that I had personally built the access road this entire subdivision relied on under a contract for the National Guard. His smirk faltered, and then it vanished completely. When their own attorney picked it up, read the seal, and quietly set it back down like it was radioactive, that was the moment they realized they weren't fining me for gravel. They were fining the man who literally owned the ground under their tires. I wasn't old as the guy who pulled federal records out of a folder to silence a homeowners association. Truth is, I had no interest in drama, control, or paperwork battles. I'd bought this piece of land to get away from all that. After 22 years in the Army Corps of Engineers, I wanted nothing more than a quiet driveway, a workshop where I could fix old engines, and maybe the occasional weekend fishing trip. My wife had passed a few years earlier, and I thought a stretch of rural property with some space to breathe would be a good way to start fresh. The house itself was nothing fancy, just a 3-bedroom ranch I planned to renovate slowly, but the land was the prize. Wide and quiet, bordered by a strip of pines on one side and open pasture on the other. The road leading up to it was gravel, but it was solid, compacted the way we'd been trained to do it in the Guard. It was mine to maintain, and I took pride in keeping it in better shape than most county roads. The first few months were peaceful. I'd wake up early, brew a pot of coffee, and walk the property line with my dog. I met a few neighbors in passing. Most were cordially no-retirees, young families, folks just trying to live their lives. I didn't join the HOA meetings, but I didn't go out of my way to antagonize them either. To be honest, I hardly thought about them. I figured if I kept my place tidy and didn't cause trouble, they'd leave me alone. That's what I thought. Anyway, the first sign of trouble came in the form of a bright orange paper taped to my garage. It claimed I was in violation for unapproved gravel expansion. At first I thought it was a mistake. They said my driveway had been widened without permission, and I owed $250 in fines, plus a demand to restore it to HOA standards. I stood there holding the paper, genuinely confused. I hadn't widened anything. The driveway was the same width it had been since I moved in. The only thing I'd done was spread a fresh layer of gravel to keep it from rotting. I'd paid for the stone myself, hauled it in, leveled it out. Apparently, in their eyes, that counted as some kind of structural crime. I tried to handle it politely. I emailed the board explaining that I had simply maintained the driveway, which was not listed anywhere in their covenants. I pointed out that my property deed included the entire roadbed. I even attached before and after photos showing no difference in width, just improved condition. A week later, I got another letter. This one was nastier. It accused me of willful disregard for HOA authority, and doubled the fine. They threatened to place a lien on my property if I didn't pay. That was when the pit in my stomach started forming. I wasn't angry yet, but I was uneasy. I'd seen bureaucratic bullying before, and I knew it could snowball fast if you let it. Still, I made one more attempt to be reasonable. I asked to attend a board meeting to clarify things in person. I showed up with my photos, my deed, and the polite assumption that adults could sort this out. Face to face. They didn't even let me finish my sentence. The president, a man named Ron, who loved to wear polo shirts embroidered with the HOA logo, cut me off. He said, "You don't decide what's allowed. We do. Pay the fine or we escalate." The rest of the board just nodded along. I walked out of that meeting realizing something important. They weren't interested in fairness. They were interested in control. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the letter in front of me and my old Army Field laptop open. I stopped thinking like a homeowner and started thinking like an engineer. If they wanted to play with paperwork, I could play harder. First thing I did was pull my original property deed, complete with surveys going back to the 1970s. They confirmed what I already knew. The roadbed was entirely mine, all the way to the county highway. Then I went deeper. I dug into county infrastructure records, zoning laws, and easement filings. That's when I struck gold. Back in 1998, I had been part of a National Guard engineering unit tasked with stabilizing rural roads in this region after a series of floods. One of those roads was this very access lane. I remembered the project vaguely, but what Premier Adinity realized until I saw the paperwork was that our unit had formal reclamation authority over the improvements, meaning the work was documented, federally certified, and tied directly to my service record. That record was still accessible through the Department of Defense archives. I put in a request, waited 2 weeks, and when the envelope arrived, I nearly laughed out loud. Inside was the stamped federal contract with my name listed as Site Engineer of Record. In other words, not only had I legally maintained this road, but the entire HOA subdivision technically owed its existence to the project I had overseen. While I was gathering my ammunition, the HOA kept pressing. More fines. More threats. They even sent a contractor to inspect my property line, leaving little flags in the soil like they were preparing for battle. Neighbors stopped waving. A few whispered apologies when no one else was around, saying the board was overzealous, but they couldn't risk speaking up. My daughter called from college asking why people online were posting about me in the HOA Facebook group, calling me a rogue property owner. That was the moment the anger started to settle, and not the hot kind, but the cold kind that sharpens your focus. By the time the next board meeting rolled around, I was ready. I walked in carrying a plain manila folder. They started the session by announcing, for the benefit of the neighbors, that Primera Waese in continuing violation, and that legal proceedings were underway. Ron leaned back in his chair like a king on his throne, waiting for me to beg. Instead, I opened the folder, pulled out the federal contract, and slid it across the table. I didn't say a word. Their lawyer picked it up first. His face drained of color as he read the header. United States Department of Defense, Army Corps of Engineers. Site Reclamation Order. 1990. My name was on the line marked Project Engineer. The document detailed the exact specifications of the road, the federal authority under which it was built, and the perpetual maintenance rights tied to the landowner of Record Me. The room went dead silent. I finally broke it with a single sentence. This road exists because I built it, under federal contract. Your covenants don't override that. I let it hang in the air. No soting, no grandstanding. Just fat. The aftermath was better than any shouting match could have been. Within 2 weeks, the fines disappeared from my account. The HOA lawyer quietly advised the board to back off. Rumors spread through the neighborhood about what had happened, though no one told the story the same way. Some said I'd sued the HOA. Some thought I'd called in military favors. The truth was simpler and sharper. I just showed them a piece of paper they couldn't argue with. Ron resigned a month later. 2 other board members followed. The HOA didn't dissolve entirely, but it became a husk of its former self. They stopped issuing petty fines. They stopped patrolling with clipboards. When I drove past the clubhouse, the parking lot was empty more often than not, and the neighbors who used to look away now waved again, tentative at first, then friendlier. No one mentioned gravel anymore. Life went back to what I'd wanted in the first place. Quiet mornings, long walks with my dog, a little fishing when the weather allowed. But I'll admit, every now and then when I drive down that smooth gravel road, I feel a small, private satisfaction. They tried to make me bend over a driveway. Instead, they learned the hard way that some of us know how to fight with documents sharper than any sword. Now, when I pass the old HOA president in town, he doesn't smirk. He looks down, or he nods stiffly. Either way, I just keep walking. Because the road is mine, the peace is mine, and the silence they left behind is the sweetest victory of all.